Martin?
Okay, before other folks got here, I just mentioned this Friday morning, 9:30 at the State House, they're going to be reading a resolution for National School Board Recognition Month of January. So whoever can make it there, that would be awesome.
Can you give that time again, Martin?
I think it's 9:30. Is that when we normally start on Friday? Yeah,
On
9:30.
Friday?
On this Friday. Yeah. So.
Will you be insulted if we're not there?
Yes, I'll be personally insulted, yes.
Thanks for doing that, Martin.
Thanks for representing us.
Being insulted, that is.
Yeah, right, yeah.
All right, so we have Donna Russo-Savage here with the AOE, so we'll go right into her. Thanks for coming, Donna. Really appreciate it.
So I think everyone, if you were able to pick up this little information sheet and a little map. I don't want to spend a lot of time going through this because
Why don't you
obviously.
tell us what the role is at the
Oh, I'm sorry. I just assumed I've met most of you at some point or another.
You probably have, but let's just make sure.
My official title is Principal Assistant to the Secretary for School Governance. I am an attorney. I worked before coming to the Agency of Education, I worked for 16 years for the legislature as nonpartisan legal staff. The last 9 of those years was with the Education Committee, so I was present while all of the different governance bills were being drafted, and actually drafted them all and drafted the amendments to undo them and to change them. And so when I moved over to the agency about 2 years ago to help implement the law, I talked with Secretary Holcomb about that I really felt best coming from a place of nonpartisanship and just helping people, and she said that is exactly what we want, and so that's what my role has been. I'm not trying to convince anybody that they should do something. I'm trying to make sure they understand what the law says they're supposed to be doing and to give them the support that they can, that they need, that I'm able to give them. So I have this little update about what has been happening, and it's as of yesterday because there were 2 reconsideration votes, so in Chelsea and in Woodford yesterday, so this has been updated as of yesterday. There have been votes in 135 towns have voted to merge 143 school districts into 35 new districts. Unified districts, which is a net reduction of 108 districts in the state. In addition, if you were to add in the Mount Mansfield Modified Unified School District that occurred prior to Act 46, it would be 149 former districts that have been merged into 36 new unified districts. The kinds of districts that have been created just run the range. There are 21 that operate all grades, 12 that operate either K6 or K8 and tuition the remaining grades, and 2 who pay tuition for all grades. During the course of this, there were several locations where all of the districts within 2, or all or almost all of the districts within 2 supervisory unions enlarged the boundaries of their supervisory union, and through that kind of movement, there have been at least 4 supervisory unions that have been eliminated. In addition, in those places where all of the districts within a supervisory union created a single district, that overarching supervisory union structure has gone away because there's no longer a need for the supervisory union structure. So there have been 8 of those that have occurred. So the number of supervisory unions and supervisory union boards has decreased. You'll see the numbers of kindergarten through grade 12 throughout the state. Approximately 66% are now either in a newly unified district or in a district such as Burlington or Rutland that is already a single district SU. Although they've all received final approval, all of those 35 new unified districts that I mentioned above, although they've all received approval and have, I think almost all of them have actually been certified to the Secretary of State, and the others will be happening very soon. So they actually are unified union school districts. They're coming on board and becoming fully operational a little bit over time. So 4 of them were operational as of July 2016, 8 this past summer, and then 18 this coming summer and 4 the following summer. There are at least 3 merger proposals that I'm expecting that the State Board will be reviewing. In January, they'll be looking at Windsor and West Windsor's proposal to merge. We're expecting that Barry, Town and Barry City are going to be coming back again with a proposal to merge. And we're also expecting that Orleans Central will be coming back with a proposal to merge. So this really runs the... Okay, well, that's the letters I received, is that's kind of the intention. So you can see on this map, all of the orange indicates places that have had successful votes to merge. The gray are places that have not had successful votes and have not presented a subsequent, and we don't expect them to be presenting a subsequent vote to merge. The blues are the three places, the three places where we are expecting those to come forward. And
Glenn, did you have a question?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay, no problem.
And the white are the places that will be, we're expecting either have or will be filing their, what we call the Section 9 proposals. The proposals of, they don't expect to be in a unified district by July 1 of 19, so how do they propose to move forward? What have they done as far as their self-evaluation or conversations with other districts, and what do they think will be the best way? January to May, the Secretary and I and Brad James as well will be reviewing all of the Section 9 proposals and having conversations with the school districts, the boards and school districts that have proposed them. There will be opportunities for those boards to supplement or change their what they've submitted if things come up during the conversations. We haven't figured out how we're going to do this yet. There are, I think I've received 35 proposals. Some of them are for a number, like I just see Flora over there. Some of them are for a number of districts. There are other places where every district within an SU has presented its own proposal, which don't, and they aren't always the same. So I think the way we're going to manage it is try to come up in regions that make sense for the way people live, and look at them regionally, like a group of them regionally, and to be thinking about how they might interact or might not interact with each other. And then, like, let's just say that this is Region 1, and Clarence, it's kind of the northern, maybe fifth of the state is what I'm pointing to, although I'm just doing this just as an example. We'd meet individually with each of the different school boards, I'm assuming, but we'd want to be meeting with all of them at around the same time so that we could be, comparing what they're saying and talking to them about what other districts had said. That's kind of how I'm envisioning it's going to go forward. It's all a little bit up in the air because we get called over to the legislature a lot this time of year, and everything kind of flies out the window. So I'm not quite sure how we're going to manage it. The state board does have copies of all of the Section 9 proposals, or will have copies. We're still trying to manage the paper and the electronics at this point. So their expectation and ours is that they're going to start reviewing them and looking through them, even though they won't actually be talking to the school boards during this phase. So then after this review and these conversations, and I know I talk really, really quickly, and I'm sorry, but I also know there's not much time, so I want to get through this so you can ask questions. For this January through May period, after this, what this culminates in is a proposal by the Secretary for, and the language in Act 46 was to merge districts and adjust supervisor union boundaries to the extent necessary to create sustainable governance entities that are capable of meeting the educational and fiscal goals of the Act. So it's only to the extent that it's necessary, but it's also this proposal is supposed to be a requirement to merge. So there's some discretion there, but the legislature is very much saying create this proposal. The proposal then goes to the state board, which is the entity that actually makes the decisions. The state board doesn't just give a thumbs up or a thumbs down, but has all of those school boards in again to talk about their proposals, and they'll ask questions of them. And then it could just say, yes, we agree with the Secretary's proposal, or more likely it will say, well, we've heard other things that make us think differently, and so here are changes we want to make. They're required to issue their proposal that, and the way that it's phrased is that that it shall merge districts, and and adjust supervisory union boundaries to the extent necessary. So when it issues its plan on November 30th of this year, that is what occurs, because the legislature has given the state board the authority to do that. So that's kind of how we're seeing it play out over the next few months. Again, I'm not quite sure what the timing is going to be, but we will be, any of you who are representing districts that have submitted the section of the proposals, we will be getting in touch to try to schedule times that we can come in and meet with the secretary. So I've got a few minutes left. Do you have questions?
Sorry.
Clarence, I just emailed you the map and the handout she's given, so if you have your computer up.
Did you hear that, Clarence?
No, I didn't.
Carrie said she just emailed you the map and the handout that we're
Oh.
looking at.
All right.
Okay. Any questions for Don?
Donna, what are the districts with polka dot?
Smallpox.
Yeah, that's the.
And it's fine if I don't. The polka dots are the elementary school districts that still remain in the modified unified union school districts. And so I don't know how familiar people are with those, but those are the situations where there were a number of elementary school districts that were all members of a union high school. And the legislature created this possibility, and it created it in response to what happened in Chittenden East and with Huntington, thank you. That it allowed the merger to go forward even if there was one or possibly two districts that did not want to go forward. So in a modified unified union school district, it is a pre-K through 12 district for all of the districts that voted yes, now towns that are members, and it is just a high school district for whatever grades the previous union high school, the elementary school district that said no was a member of the union high school. So for example, Cambridge is still an elementary school district, but it is a member of the Llewellyn North Modified Union.
And do they
School
need to
district.
submit, like, did Cambridge have to submit a section 9?
Yes, but
Yeah.
not all of the polka dots did.
Oh.
And one of them, Huntington, has said they're going to present it to the voters again because they think that they should be part of it. So, yeah, Cambridge hasn't submitted anything yet. I don't know if they're going to. So what the
Sorry,
legislature,
Wait.
Excuse me, the Huntington board is going to go to the voters to join?
we got a letter saying that they're going to present it. Yeah.
So in that case, will the other boards have to agree to let them join?
In that
Or is it the voters?
It's the voters, but I should check the timing, but with Huntington, definitely the timing is such that it would need to be the voters, yeah. There may be some places where the articles of agreement gave the others enough time that if they voted, they could join without it. Huntington is definitely so far beyond that the voters would need to approve it.
The voters of the receiving communities
Correct.
have to approve it too.
Right.
So Huntington is going to put it to their voters, approve or not approve, and then the rest of MMU has to go out to the rest of their communities for a separate vote.
Correct, and it's all, it's commingled because they are a single district.
Donna, you mentioned talking to the other boards. How are you logistically planning on doing that? Like coming and meeting us and having a meeting with, and what is the plan? What do you want to achieve with that?
Do you mean when the secretary does, or when the secretary does? We've started coming up with a list of questions that we want to make sure are answered.
Okay.
In every situation. We haven't come up with the details, and we've got to figure it out because we're running out of time. But my expectation is that we'll invite the school board members or representatives of the school board to come to the agency.
No, we do that again.
Yes, simply because the secretary is constantly being pulled over to the legislature, and I can't see that she'd be able to travel around the state during the legislative session. So that's about the extent of what I know. I'm sorry. And it will be when it's with the secretary, it'll be extremely informal. We're sitting around her table in her office having this conversation. It's not going to be to the extent that there is a presentation or something that you wanted to give, that's fine, but it still will be a very informal situation.
She's done that to date? I mean, has agreed to meet with groups that are having a hard time, or sort of to talk through what some
Right.
options might
Been there.
be? Yeah.
One last question would be, so for the districts that presented an alternative, say November 30th would be when we will know
For sure.
for sure. So that would just be this back and forth until November 30th.
Right, you'll have what the secretary proposes.
By May.
By May 30th, and then,
Okay.
You'll then be presenting testimony to the state board, so you'll be getting, I think probably some idea about what the state board thinks about whatever it was you proposed at that point. But nothing is final under the current law until November 30th.
One of the discussions we've had is the law says on or before June 1st and on or before November 30th. So given that the order is supposed to merge districts effective July 1, 2019, my encouragement has been that the sooner that final order is issued, the better it is in terms of people being able to respond, put together a budget, do the things that need to be done in order to actually become operational. So, I would support an approach that had, the October state board meeting, rather than the November state board meeting, just to give that extra month for folks to, but again, I think it depends on the level of back and forth the state board wants to do at their meetings.
The other thing is the state board will be issuing default articles of agreement when it issues the state plan. So there will be something there that can be used, unless and until the board chooses to do something else. One of the things that we've tossed around is how do you choose that first board? So one of the things we've been thinking is perhaps the articles of agreement will include something that the first board consists of the chair and the vice chair of each of the merging districts until the new ones are, so I don't know, something like that, just so that it's somebody who's already been elected, somebody who knows what's going on, and it isn't saying, well, we like this person or that person. It's saying these people will assume that role until there is an election to hire people, to elect people.
On a transitional.
Right, just on a transitional.
And so in that
Him and then Doug.
my question was about that first board, knowing that that was its own challenge in our transition, just like getting sworn in and working on a budget, and it sounds as though those communities would be they would not be having to, they would have to vote a budget. Yeah. Town meeting day, okay. So I'm empathizing with those challenges and appreciating that we didn't have that exact thing going on. But the proportional voting on those boards, are related to your voting population, not related to
Right,
taking.
but you have different ways of creating that proportionality. So, I mean, again, this is just me thinking about how things can be like the fairest that they can possibly be. I'm thinking, and whether this is something the state board will like or not, is perhaps saying there are going to be 2 board members for each place, and they'll be elected by everyone, so that you have that hybrid model until the voters decide that they want to have, some other thing. So that seems.
And you can weight the votes, right, or something to
You
make
don't
sure
have to weight
it's
the votes
compliant
if you
with
do
the law.
that.
Oh, okay.
Right, as long as the entire district
got
votes
it.
on
2
everyone,
from
you can
each.
have 2 from each town, yeah. So that seems to me to be the I don't know, the fairest and the simplest and the least controversial way to at least start things out and then go from there. But again, this is just me thinking about things in the middle of the night, not having the state board choose anything.
I think from the very beginning, there was discussion about the role of the state board, and certainly they are kind of the end of the line. How involved today has the state board been? I mean, I know the agency has been the lead and a lot of discussion legislature. Is the state board, maybe don't answer this, but having served on the state board at times, I wonder how much the state board is involved.
They have, I think we've all grown in this process. The initial merger proposals that came to the agency and the state board were primarily those that fit within that accelerated model, which fit with what the legislature had already said was this is the best way to do things, which is all of the districts in an SU becoming a single district. So while we were still getting our feet wet with it, it was kind of the simpler ones. And then as time has gone on, both they and we have started pushing back more and asking harder questions and requiring, more detailed data to support whatever it is they're saying. And really in the last year or so, well, I guess it's only been a couple of years that it's actually been happening, but definitely in the last year, the state board's questions have become very good, and they really are, really understand things. One of the things that the current chair did was, although everyone is expected to read every one that comes before the board, if there are 4 or something before the board on any particular meeting, she assigns people to different ones just to make sure that they give an extra special review of it by at least a couple of people for each one. So no, I think the next phase we're all going to be learning again. So I don't know how we're going to.
I'm glad to hear that they're engaged. 'Cause,
Yep, they're very
when I was there, we
engaged.
had an excellent chair, Steve Morse, but prior to them, I worked with chairs, and it was like we were all over the ranch, and nobody really had a direction. That's good.
Yeah.
So when I look at the final steps here for the interstate school districts, are there any considerations to them, or are they truly exempt if
They're-
you're not even looking at?
They're exempt because we really can't look at them. They were created by an act of Congress, so there really isn't a lot we can do.
Not even as a partner or a, because I look at some of the neighbors, right?
Yeah, I think it was possible that they could have pulled others in if they went through their own process, but the legislature exempted them, and so we've sort of just let them be exempt. And they aren't even required to do the self-evaluation and come forward with how they improve things. So, they really are exempt, at least from this particular law.
Anyone have a third one? Anyone have a third one?
You'll have to ask them.
So we actually built a little bit of talking time for us, and that we told Donna that she could scoot out of here around 5:30. So is there any other burning questions for her, Dan?
Not on this topic, but a different one I saw. And this will only take a second. You can tell me that,
Okay.
I saw reference to a Senate bill being proposed, 181, I think, to change the way that income sensitivity is doled out to the towns. Any idea about that? or
I
small
never talked
fraction?
to Brad about it. I think
Okay.
my understanding of everything financial is really
Okay,
high
all
level.
right. Good, thank you, thank you.
I kind of have a statement, it's not speaking on behalf of VSBA, but speaking on behalf of me. But that, and we had that ride in the car ride over with Kim and Mary Kate, a lot of us really stuck our necks out in our communities and said, we need to do something, another state's going to do it to us. It would be very disappointing to see if the state backed down at this stage and did nothing. That would be really hard on us. And
I think that's really important for you to let both the state board and the legislature know that, but especially the legislature, because the state board will be issuing this thing that is supposed to be a law right before the legislative session starts. And if the legislature starts hearing from the people who are not happy with what they're doing, that could very easily turn it around. So I think it's really important to let, whichever side you're coming from, it's important to let the legislature.
And it's actually a
know.
very curious thing, because I see Celeste over there shaking her head, because Celeste doesn't like Act 46, but they complied with it. And if they start giving people exemptions, you're going to be pretty upset, aren't you?
Well, I'm not going to be upset. I'll be run out of town on a rail
Exactly.
because I will have lied.
I'll be right behind you.
And so will all the other
Yeah.
people on the Act 46 committee will have lied
Right.
to the people who put us in our positions of trust. And no, thank you.
Right.
Dan?
On the other hand, just to play the devil's advocate, it's just complying with the law. And so I don't think it's fair. I mean, anybody can do what they want, but the law says what the law says. And whether it's been construed one way or another, I assume that the agency and the Board of Ed will comply with the law. And it's not my intention to go and ask them to not comply with it, nor is it my intention to go and say, just because I interpreted it one way earlier, now I'm expecting the law to be interpreted that way now. There's so much room for interpretation, reading through it, and, you know, you've got your approach to it, mine would be slightly different.
Okay, any other burning things? Do you have something else to say?
I was just gonna say really quickly that one of the things that
And Flora?
I'm sorry, one of the things that I just want to say, because, and this is something that I say to the legislature and to anybody that I talk to about this looks, there's an awful lot more orange on this than anybody expected there to be, I think. Which can be a good thing, or it can just be a neutral thing. And that's because there are definitely places that are taking this very seriously and are seeing the possibilities and the flexibility that they can get from it. There are other places where I think there's less buy-in, and I think it's possible that things may go on the way they always have, but they just only have one board now. So I think, you know, whether or not this is actually a successful experiment is going to be whether the school boards take it seriously and take advantage of the flexibility that's there.
So we only got time for a couple more, because we did tell Donna she could skate out of here, so can you real quick, Kim?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I hope that the conversation becomes the opportunities being realized, because we're now coming into our second budget cycle, and
Where are you from?
Essex Westford.
Okay.
And we, you know, are down a superintendent and consolidating central offices and really beginning to realize opportunities as MMU, our neighbors, have been doing, and there are a couple years ahead of us. I hope we get to that place in this Act 46 conversation that is about realized opportunities that are around students.
If you can send me, I actually am going to stay home tomorrow to work on a report to the legislature. If you can send me bullet points about things that you've noticed, that would be awesome to be able to put it in there. Because at this point, we're so early in the process of the places that have moved, we really can't say, oh yes, and they've saved this amount of money and they've done this.
And we don't vote until
and-
April, so we literally had our first budget overview that was just parameter setting
Right,
last
right.
night. So I'm not sure any specifics I could provide, but I know the folks at MMU are really realizing the opportunities intended with Act 46, even though they were Act 153. But if I can come up with something tangible, I will definitely send it to you. You're welcome.
So unless somebody else has something totally burning.
No, it's,
we'll-
I just want to make a statement while Donna's here, okay? I've worked with Donna since I could work. But, you know, I happen to be on a board that's white right now, okay? And I grudgingly got on the committee because we needed somebody, we all know your experiences, and that's not handicapped sometimes. But anyway, what I want to say is, regardless of the outcome, it's been a great experience. We have made changes, we have had really debates, it almost became arguments. We are in a much better place right now than we were 3 years ago. So regardless of the outcome, whether we merge or go side by side or go somewhere else, it was a very valuable experience, and it's not over. It's not over. The amount of meetings we had to look at the alternative plan and the work we submitted, it was just amazing. And some of the conversations, it amazed me with my background in education, that people were willing to say these things and work on it, because I would have said, no way. So, you know, I don't want people to think in the end that if not everybody runs and merges, like, you know, I remember Essex and Westford talking about this 20 years ago, okay? So I don't think it was maybe quite as smooth as it is in some places. But a lot of good has come out of this legislation.
I just need to say, thank you.
As long as we're doing this, Donna, can I thank you as well, because when Marlboro presented before the Board of Ed, Donna stood up before the proceeding even started and said, if you grant Marlboro the status which they are asking, you can still change them to a different supervisory union afterwards, which changed the perspective of the State Board of Ed, I believe, in the room that day, so I thank you for that.
All right, thanks for coming down. Really appreciate your time.
Good to see you, Donna.
Stay home, have fun tomorrow.
I know, it is nice to look in your jammies sometimes.
It's amazing.
So, this board, for those of you who are new to the board, spent a lot of time in the lead up to last session discussing Act 46 and possible possible changes, and it was a good process, I thought, and culminated in a set of recommendations that ultimately became most of what was Act 49 last year. So some of the modifications that were made really tracked the recommendations of this board. I don't anticipate interest on the part of leadership in modifying Act 46 this session, but I do expect there will be a handful of bills introduced by legislators intending to, I've heard of one that would say that the state board can't order mergers in the final state plan. So I just wanted to take a temperature of the board regarding your thoughts about further amendments to Act 46 before we get too far on in the session and I get asked to respond.
So I'll just say something too, that the VSBA has never taken a stance for or against Act 46. What we've done all along is take the stance where we were going to remain engaged with the legislature in helping them craft something. So we could have said, no, whatever you do, we're against it, and we chose not to do that. So that's always been our stance right along. So given that, what are your thoughts about if there is legislation proposed, how should the VSBA react to it?
I guess I have two. One is enough already. You need to stop making changes and you need to let the group of volunteers that you have tasked this huge change to, you need to let us get caught up. The other is, if you take away the stick now, you're gonna make a whole bunch of us look like fools and liars. And I cannot tell you how upsetting that is going to be. And you will have lost legislatures, people who got out there and convinced voters to do something they absolutely didn't want to do. So if you want to shoot that credibility in the foot, go ahead and take away the stick. And you're not going to get anything else done in the kingdom or anywhere else.
Yeah.
Done? I mean, Dan.
Well, I guess I would say a couple of things. I went to the governor's retreat at Norwich University and saw two panels of people stand up and extol the virtues of having merged, and none of them they felt like they had to do it because the law was coming down heavily on them. It was because they said, we see educational benefits, we see financial benefits, all of which is good. That would make me think that they chose to merge because of the benefits that they saw rather than the fear factor. So that's one thing, and the other thing I guess is right next door to where I live is a former supervisory union which is completely torn asunder, and you must know this, Nicole, from listening to what's coming up out of Brattleboro and that region down there. It has created dysfunction and disharmony in places where there should be function and harmony. So I guess I would say we should all keep that in mind too before anything else. There's got to be a way to make this small supervisory union become again a functioning unit where they can sit and talk to each other. So, that's not to say a stance one way or the other, but be careful not to exacerbate those kinds of things.
Any other thoughts for Nicole?
I guess I worry a little bit about the conversation of, people not wanting to look like fools if they're not, if the carrot is taken out. I think that, especially with the conversation we had this morning, is that we never really completely understand somebody else's situation unless you are part, of that community. And it is true that sometimes, especially for Washington Central, that is supposed to be the poster child of Act 46, and it's supposed to be easy, it's not for lack of trying, and you are putting a proposal that comes within Act 49. If by any chance that proposal was accepted, which I would hope so, it shouldn't be seen as, like we all, like in proficiency learning, we sometimes all arrive at places at different times, and it doesn't mean that they don't all want to be proficient. It might just be that the timing might be different. It doesn't mean that anybody else is going to look bad or that you were lying to your committee. Like it's circumstances, or otherwise we're passing judgment on, it's in everyone. If anything comes out of Act 46, it shouldn't be the fraction of communities. It should be, so we at least put together what I think more like puts mind and heart together. At the same time, it's not an ending point. It's just like a, like a progression to, like we have more in common that people are willing to have, but we are also in a much better position than we've ever been before. So I don't want, I hear the conversation feel like maybe these other alternatives are not a good thing, and it's not, as you all know, it's not for lack of trying.
Mary Kay?
So, I just remember the first presentation, I think it was Dale gave to the community I was in about Act 46, and there were two pieces of the legislation that, sort of prompted us to move forward. One was, if you don't do it, the legislature is going to do it for you, but coupled with that was, the part of the legislation that says, you got to show that evidence that this is why we should remain independent. And so I think the legislation already has that piece in it that allows for, if that's the community that can show that, and they can show that they can meet the needs of students, then, the legislature already says that. So I don't think there's any need to support any change to the legislation. It's what we've been all, that's the playing field we've all been working on, and to change the playing field now doesn't make any sense.
So when Mary Kay was saying that, I was seeing a general nodding of heads. Is that sort of where we're at on this? Is that, do you feel comfortable with that, Nicole?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. It was important that you had that opportunity to both hear from Donna about where they're going and what's happening, and what your expectations are in terms of this organization. So thank you.
All right, I think we can move on.
I have one observation, that
No, Lucas.
the fact that the alternative structures are supposed to provide evidence that it's better for the kids to stay. Just looking at this map and overlaying it against the SBAC testing results, you can kind of see if this is a map that also represents dysfunctional governance, perhaps. At least that's the case from my anecdotal evidence from my own district, which I take some responsibility for, as a matter of fact. But when you overlay it over the SBAC testing results, in those schools that are proficient, and those that are under the average, state average, it has an amazing correlation.
Wow.
For that, I think you could. I mean, we're not being scientific in this observation, but if this is a map of functional and dysfunctional governance, which is my anecdotal evidence, at least my little corner right there, I consider it dysfunctional. It goes to show what good quality governance from school boards can do.
Interesting. Thanks for that unscientific study. All right, moving on. So Agenda for World Class Education Retreat, which was held today. I think I was there. Who was all there? Raise your hands. So we had a nice show of folks today. So
I'll turn it over to you
all
all
right.
to provide the rest of the board with
someone
an
want to do a
overview.
synopsis of what happened today? Who was there?
Boy, how can you do a synopsis?
Mary Kay.
Good.
Jump in to add. So, really the focus was on equity in terms of moving the world-class education agenda forward. We worked on trying to define equity. I think we're all sort of on the same page. We need some wordsmithing. Nicole's going to do that. Make sure that we got
In her free time between now and 8:30 in the morning.
I already put together something and sent it to Jeff, and he told me it's too long, so I said, you do it then.
Don't let him do that.
So now you just get to drink the wine.
That's
without
right.
extra
I was just
time.
gonna
Hook as far as I can.
Let's talk about it at dinner. Don't give it to Jeff.
But there were just good exercises for us to sort of recognize, biases we have and what happens in schools. At the end, we separated into two groups for, part of the real work, and one group worked on practices that impact equity, and one group worked on policy. Almost all the school board members, because we're been so well trained, went to the policy group. Yeah, except
I'm glad Fleur was
Fleur
over there.
can tell you like the other group did. So part of what
Practice.
the recommendations that came out of it from the policy group was there's going to be a group with the Nicole and the Vermont School Board Association working on really a toolkit for a policy on equity for schools. Some tools in addition to the policy for interpretation and data and for monitoring, and then also as part of the toolkit, some prompts for communications among school board members, with administration and staff, and then with the community. Flo, you want to fill in the recommendations from?
Can I cut in real
Yeah,
quick here?
please
Just
do.
to make sure everybody's on the same page. What we're talking about is kind of a review of the Agenda for World-Class Education. Was a document that VSBA and VSA came up with in 2012, I think was the year. And it's basically, instead of being reactive to what the legislature is doing, this is our proactive thing. This is what we want for kids. We don't, it's not like, we're not talking about Act 46 in here and things like that. This is all about technology and equity and things like that. So it's really exciting stuff. And we've been recognized nationally for this. We've presented at the National School Board Association's conference. I've mentioned this several times when I've been at national things, and people are amazed from other states that we have such a document and that we are proactive. So it's time for a refreshing of this, and so that's what we're engaged in. So,
So in practice, we talked about, have that right in front of me, but one of the most important things that we recognize is ongoing education, not just so education on bias. We often just take one shot at it, and that's all we do, but it's not ongoing. So that it's ongoing and understanding of roles and responsibilities for both board members and educators to have continued education on that too. And then the second part of that was the student voice, that give real importance to what students have to say more often. Neil had some great examples of what students have come up in his district. Am I forgetting one, Celeste? There was one more thing.
Equity in practice and having training that's ongoing. Because it's not something that you discover once and you're all done with it. It's something that it keeps kind of sneaking up on you, what your prejudices or your limitations might be.
Yeah, and that awareness piece. Yeah.
Yes.
Be aware of our own biases and model it. So be aware of what we do and be courageous enough to say, this is what happened to me, so then more people will be willing to show a moment of weakness that builds that stronger leadership.
Own their behavior.
Yeah, I would also say, so prior to this, there was a group that met of superintendents and school board members, and in terms of the Agenda for World-Class Education, and looking at, where we've come, where we still have to go, that group kind of identified equity as the piece that really needs to be addressed to move forward with that agenda. And then defining equity, I think most of this group is familiar with the difference between, everybody getting equal opportunity, which is the same, as opposed to equitable, because different students come from different places and have different needs. And so that's sort of what we're focusing in terms of defining equity.
And stop me if you mentioned it, Mary Kate, but out of our group that was looking at model policy that'll come after a definition of equity, that toolkit to include the procedures and the maybe a talking points and a discussion guide. But I think appropriately, Nicole reminded us that we don't have a resolution for her to take to the legislature to make it a law that every district have an equity policy on the books, or anything that, or training for that matter, anything that would add the potential for an unfunded mandate or consume time of Nicole's and Jeff's on something that we haven't spoken to as a full membership regarding resolution. If something should come up around that, I think they've heard from the group around the interest in making sure that there's some weight behind this notion of not just sending out and letting it lay flat in our inboxes a toolkit on equity, but rather this becomes something that'll be a big agenda part of the superintendent board chair training, or we'll look at it maybe as regions, as a spring conversation, or however we might bring this out. It's not necessarily going to be to consume our director's time because we don't have a full membership resolution on it. So if that becomes important, that can be brought before the group over the summer and then brought before the membership in the fall.
But I think both Nicole and Jeff felt that us having a definition
Yeah.
would really help them if they're going to go to anybody and say anything about equity, and someone says, well, what do you mean? So that's why Nicole thank you for doing this, is redrafting a previously redrafted definition, which will presumably be coming out tomorrow, but just so they have something that they can point to and say, we aren't either just letting other people figure this stuff out for us.
And Jeff actually made clear to say, there's probably 4 proposals coming up on education funding, none of them more equitable than what's currently existing, and so they will be using whatever comes out of this body of work to point to that definition, and where whatever comes before the legislature that is likely targeted at cost containment or redoing our funding formula is likely to compromise equity, and they have the ammunition, I think, to do their job well.
So we're meeting again tomorrow.
Stay tuned.
And so do you have any comments, questions, stuff that you want to give to us so when we come in that we're have another perspective on things?
Can I just give everybody an overview of what the work tomorrow is?
Absolutely.
So today we were joined by some principals and curriculum coordinators. Tomorrow we have more.
And one person from the Department of
And
Education.
an Agency of Education representative. Tomorrow we're having more reps from the Agency of Education, more principals, 2 tech center directors, and 2 folks from higher ed. And the focus is going to be on, the agenda has for every pillar 3 tiers of activity: legislation, state policy, and local action. We've heard, and I think Martin, you've been saying this for a couple years now, it'd be great to have some monitoring tools so that boards know how we're doing with implementation of the education quality standards and proficiency-based graduation requirements. So we did that survey out to the membership and have 5 areas where folks have said they would like some tools to help with monitoring. There's some national sort of benchmark assessment tools that we're going to break people up into groups and have them distill into layperson's board level language. Not the stuff that the teachers are having to absorb and deal with and work through, but at a higher policy level, what questions should board be asking and what indicators should boards be looking at in order to identify progress. So it's going to be a real work session that will be informed not just by our members that are in the room, but a lot of the folks on the ground that are doing this work around the state. So hopeful that we'll come out of there with some useful materials.
Any other thoughts? I guess the only other thing I'd say was it was amazing to see how much stuff was tied to equity. I mean, I think we tied everything to equity.
Right.
It's like, it's clear that that's, I think, our biggest stumbling block in the state in terms of education is the whole equity issue.
Busing in the morning.
Everything.
Yeah. So you get kids to school.
Lunch.
Lunch, yeah.
Yeah. So,
After school activities.
Carrie is, speaking of lunch, is dinner ready?
Let me go see.
Because if it is, this might be a good breaking point. If not, we'll keep moving on.
Whatever they've got out there.
I gotta leave for my school board meeting soon.
Oh, yeah.
You wanna take some food for the road?
I'll just
Certainly.
shove something through right
All
now.
right, so let's take lunch.
Good plan.
My lord, no lunch, let's take dinner. We're rerunning the equity statement as we speak here. So, Nicole, you got a whole bunch of things to report. Right here.
Okay, so apologize that the strategic plan monitoring report was not part of the packet. As I indicated, I was out with the flu 2 days last week, and, you know, things got away from us. You'll note that there hasn't been a lot of activity on legal and policy services, and that's because Emily's last day was shortly after our last meeting. I'll talk about that process in just a minute, but recognizing you probably haven't had a lot of time to look at this, does anybody have any questions about the strategic plan monitoring report? Anything you want to highlight other than Emily? We're down to one final payment for dues, so I would characterize the transition to a new due structure as a success. The one outstanding we've been told is on its way. Did you hear back?
I was gonna say, he just called me right before the meeting and said that they had some issues in their office and it's gonna be coming soon.
Perfect. So we expect to have full payment. Which, when you think about everything, that's a good thing. And then I've spent a good amount of time preparing for this retreat that we're at the midpoint at. And I'm gonna have, Susan is gonna speak to her board development work, and
She lived here.
Yeah,
she was
yeah. So let me just run through a couple of other things, and then I'll hand it over to Susan. So the legislative collaborative, you'll remember at last meeting, I asked for authorization to essentially dip into reserves in order to account for the fact that we were losing revenue by no longer being able to staff the collaborative this year with Emily's departure. So not only were we not going to collect the revenue from all the partner organizations, but we had to contribute to a position. So the solution that we have arrived at is law student in her last semester at Vermont Law School named Catherine Hope. She arrived, on the scene last week and pretty quickly is getting her drinking from the fire hose. Found the ed funding video very helpful, and is in the State House 2 or 3 days a week, depending on the week. She's also doing a judicial clerkship in Rutland, so she's managing that, but she's really playing the lead role in writing the reports. That leaves a gap in what we typically provide to other members in the collaborative, which is a comprehensive schedule of all legislative committee hearings, sort of a daily digest of what happened in committees, and testimony that was offered. And so we have contracted with Downs, Racklin, Martin who's a firm in town that provides lobbying services. They are not lobbying on our behalf. They're not in the building representing us, but they are sort of on the back end monitoring all the committee calendars, making sure that we are appraised of what's happening when and where. And they've got a big team over in the building, so it's just nice to be able to get tidbits that we may otherwise not have or get by virtue of Emily not being over there. Catherine may be able to get there by the end of the session, but we really wanted to have some folks with a real familiarity with the building and the pace of the building be alerting us to, you guys better get over here. So that's the approach that we've taken. You all should have gotten the first report yesterday. And so far seems to be working rather well. We're ironing out, the glitches that always happen when you start off the session and you've got a whole new cast of characters. We also have 2 new executive directors at the special ed administrators and principals, so they're new to the mix. So fair amount of my time in December was spent trying to pull that model together and get everybody on board. So happy to share that we've done it. The process for replacing the Director of Legal and Policy Services position has hopefully almost concluded. So Martin, Susan, and Jeff Francis served on the hiring committee. We received about a dozen applications and we interviewed 6 folks, 3 really highly qualified folks, any of whom would be able to do the job really well. I am prepared to offer the position to someone, but I haven't had that conversation yet, so I'm reluctant to say who it is. But she is a attorney who has a lot of experience in private practice, but she's also served on the school board for at least 10 years, both as a chair and as a member of an Act 36 study committee. She chaired the SU policy committee in her supervisory years, so she has a lot of really practical experience in addition to a legal background. It's a very, very strong candidate, and so I hope to be able to introduce you to her next month. But it's, as was the case when we found Susan, when interviewing candidates, it's apparent of what value having served on a school board brings to an individual's knowledge and appreciation for the work. And so I think that we're hopefully going to be in a good place in a short time. Any questions about that process?
So is it possible we'll have that new person sort of doing a parallel thing for some part of this session?
That's my hope, yeah. So what I expect there will be about a month transition. But I'm hopeful that somebody will be able to start in mid-February, and then that will give 2.5 months of in the building getting to know the process and the players and the issues, which I think is great, without the pressure of start writing a legislative report on day 1. So I'm pleased that we were able to bridge the gap there with a cobbled together solution. Any other questions?
How's Emily doing?
I actually had to text her yesterday to ask her, is there a new member to the Senate Education Committee? So, she seems good. She started at the agency on Monday, and I just asked Donna how she's doing, and I'm sure she's doing very well.
She stopped by yesterday to get the law books for the department, not realizing the law books are 65 of them in her
Yes.
little tiny car. I was like, I don't think you're getting out of the driveway.
Yeah.
She said, well, I'm just gonna have to stay then.
So yes, the law books are in. You should be getting them back in your systems shortly. Susan, we'll talk about the board development calendar and plan.
So, hopefully you all remember back in November, you were invited to participate in a survey, as were all school board members in the state. We gave it 7 workshop descriptions. 4 of them scored very high and the other 3 less so by the 82 members who responded to the survey. And I'll remind you that's 82 out of 1,350, give or take. So we asked, we listened, we didn't get a lot of people talking. The number one the winner of those 7 was a education funding workshop, calling paying for it all, trying to manage education in the challenging fiscal situation we find ourselves, which will include reviewing what the current finance system is and also integrating anything that we know is happening into the future. And then what we've opted to do this year is to take on 2 new live workshops and stagger them. And so each of those 2 will happen once in the northern half of the state, once east, once west. And similarly, they will happen in the south of the state, east and west. So they should be reasonably accessible. We learned some other things from that survey, including the fact that those who are willing to travel 45 minutes. And so we think we've got everybody pretty well covered with that. So one of those is the education funding, and the other one is really a blend of 2 of the choices we gave that included both goal setting and monitoring, which will be an opportunity to share with our membership some of what comes out of tomorrow's session in the World Class Agenda, when we're going to be talking about monitoring tools for equity, or around equity with student performances. So those are those 2, and they are scheduled in March. I believe in your packet is descriptions and schedules and maps and everything else. And then right on the tails of that will be coming the essential work for Vermont school boards in 7 locations around the state, followed by a webinar for those who can't make it and or want an archive to refer back to. So that's all going on, and we have webinars scheduled. There's one coming up in January 23rd. That's the annual early in the session legislative update, followed by late February at town meeting preparation. And my intent with that is to cover off the issues that we anticipate school boards are going to have to confront or address in presentations of budgets and community dialogue, and also to incorporate a template PowerPoint for everybody that you can modify and customize for your own district and your own specific needs, but that will provide guidelines on talking points, essentially. And simultaneously, we are updating some of the toolkits on the website. So the board reorganization toolkit, which really comes into play prior to the first meeting of the new board, will be live and up and running by town meeting day, as will a toolkit that pulls together resources for new board members to tide them over until those essential trainings in April, mostly in April. And we're also pulling together resources for board chairs and creating a new toolkit for them. And so that will be, again, resources that are appropriate for everybody to review, but specifically to help in developing strong board leaders, which we all know is really important to governance. So that's kind of the rundown on all of that. Anybody have questions? Yeah, Don?
I don't know if it's a question, Susan, but when we met in Winooski and had our subgroups, there were a group of people, and we didn't have a lot of Franklin County people there, so it was mainly Chittenden County, but certainly I think Franklin County people would feel the same. They were talking about, maybe having another meeting in February when the legislature's really got geared up. After hearing you, I guess I would appreciate having you consider that when we publicize this meeting, it's going to be in 7 locations, you said?
Right, that's primarily for new board members, the essential work toolkit.
Because I was just wondering if that's happening at a site, would there be an opportunity to have just a session for continuing board members that somebody might facilitate? Not that they want to go to that, but not to take and ask people to come out for another night. So just something I'd like to toss out, that if there's a day, a time, a place, would there be a possibility of getting another room there and inviting continuing board members who might want to come in and just have a dialogue about pending legislation? Wouldn't mean that anybody from the staff has got to work another night. We could try to take it into something to consider.
Oh, I think it's a great idea, and that I think would also really fall to all of you as regional representatives, whether that's something that A, you see would be attended, and B, whether you'd be okay to facilitate.
Because, I don't know, I don't think we're different than the rest of the states. I've worked in 7 different counties. You get a new board member, you're invited to something. If you had a board member that's been on the board 5 or 15 years saying, well, I have a meeting in the same place, let's get together, we'll go in, might encourage some people to go who otherwise might say, oh, I'm not going to do that. But please consider it.
We make it a habit to, Don, to actually go to that essentials training.
Well, I knew in some cases people did, but Joe,
Folks, I don't know if anybody else
said
does
that,
that.
it's primarily for new people. What I'm saying is,
Yeah, but what we do is we get to, you hear the same thing and you talk about it a little bit and.
so maybe we encourage people to follow your model.
I just think it's important to support them in the training, and if you say, I'm going, you need a lift.
Right, my board is the same way. We try to all attend kind of a refresher.
It's a little mini board retreat with the newbies.
Right.
Yeah. And toward that, I would hope that you, through the board chairs, to their new members, would be encouraging all new members, we were just talking about this, to come for training, because most districts don't have the resources to provide it, and people show up after being elected and often don't know what's involved in the job. And so if everybody can, and if the veteran board members are also at those meetings, then everybody's starting on the same page. That can only help.
Thank you.
So if anybody's
definitely
looking
been
for
busy.
me in March or April, find me on my cell phone.
In addition to, I don't know how many of you have used the video that you put together around, are you thinking about running for school board? But we sent it all to you. We sent the link to you all. We did not send it to the full membership. We sent it to superintendents.
And we sent it to municipal clerks, who of course don't have a vehicle for sharing it with the public per se. I have seen it on some school district websites, which.
And some
make me
town
very happy.
websites. It's been on some town websites
And
also.
some town websites.
So just a really nice overview of the practical and legal requirements and what it means to be on a school board, which was great. She's clearly got the animation program down.
Oh yeah, I'm a star, I've done 2 of them.
I think it's great to send it municipal, because I don't know about your towns, but in our towns, if people come in and say, I'd like to leave a petition here, I'm running for XYZ office, it's there, so the town clerks know who's running.
Well, and also, the town clerks need to know, I mean, they're the ones who are making sure the
So
local
there are people,
ballots
if
are
they have
correct.
this, can say, you know, you're running for school board, are you aware of this?
But for those of you who are on boards where you know you have transitions coming, I would encourage you to share this as broadly as you can, and by which I mean, you know, post it on Front Porch Forum in your town. I tried to do it statewide, and it was gonna cost us $7,000.
Oh, gosh.
You do it individually, it costs $0. So I would really strongly encourage that. You know, you may even get a contested election. Wouldn't that be something?
It says the video's been removed by the user
Where?
on the YouTube.
Okay, well, we'll look
Yeah,
into that.
look into that.
So, School Board Appreciation Month, as Martin indicated earlier, the legislature is preparing to recognize January as School Board Appreciation Month. So we're going to send, this was news to us that it was going to be on Friday. So we don't have a lot of time to let people know about it, but we will send an email out tomorrow just saying this is happening, and if you'd like to attend, here's where you go. We will be there, we will take pictures, we will put together a more formal email communication to board members with the text of the resolution and some pictures. We're gonna.
We hope for at least one school board member to be there, right?
I
mean, like,
know. Well, there's some legislators who are school board members.
Right,
So
okay,
we'll-
some
worst
are-
case scenario, I'll corral them and take a picture.
Golly.
We did have big plans for School Board Appreciation Month this
Parade
year.
and-
Well, we had a really good idea. So we were gonna send a thank you card to everyone with a coupon for Darn Tough socks. The job of a school board member is darn tough.
That's awesome.
And that is going to happen next year. The timeline
awesome.
was just too short to engage them and for them to be able to participate, but we've opened that dialogue now. They're
That's
very
great.
supportive, and we have a calendar date for October to talk about the details for January 29th.
It's a great
That
idea.
is a great
Yeah, that is
I won't
awesome.
retire yet.
So,
I won't
given
take
that
my
didn't
socks off
pan
yet.
out, we are, the newsletter is scheduled to go out next week, Carrie, is that, are we on track
Hopefully.
for next week? Yep. And we're gonna have a center piece. Centerfold. Thank you.
Is that Susan too?
That's not me.
So that's our way of saying thank you. I have a message of appreciation in the newsletter. And we're also sending a note to superintendents. Once the legislature has designated January as School Board Appreciation Month, we will alert superintendents to that with a list of some suggested activities for them to do at the local level if they want to, recognizing that January is quickly passing us by. Thank you for all you do as school board
About
members.
school board appreciation, Mr. Chair. Does VSBA still recognize school board members who've served 25, 30, 40 years? I know at one time we used to, at the annual meeting, if a school board member had served X number of years, presented a certificate. I think of Clyde, he had 35, 40 years.
35, yeah.
Do we do that anymore?
So we were doing it at the regional meetings for quite a while, and it became awkward because we would recognize people that weren't there, and or sometimes we got the dates wrong, and then it became an argument.
Yeah.
Or I've been on and off this board and on this board,
Yeah,
and then I
on
served
this
4 years
board,
on
yeah.
this board.
So our approach recently has been to, upon request, provide certificates recognizing years of service from the School Boards Association that can then be given at the local level. But open to other suggestions, and then obviously we do the the annual recognition of a school board.
So superintendents would know that, right? Although many times school board members there are longer.
Outlive
superintendents.
superintendent.
Yeah, I mean,
I just toss
it's
it out. I don't
not
need an
unusual for us to get a request. to do
Generally, the superintendents will request it right before elections. Like the last board meeting that a board member's gonna be at, they'll give me a list of, almost all superintendents will give me a list of people they want certificates for, especially if they're stepping off.
Okay, so there's a mechanism there
Yes.
if we wanted to do something.
Yes.
Good.
Okay, and then the last piece for my report is that you have the copy of the auditor's review. So we do not get a full audit every year. So we have one every other year, and in the interim year, the auditor reviews our financial statements and basically says that they are accurate. And that's what's happened now. The auditor has stated that our financial statements represent an accurate representation of the financial status of the organization. So you have that. If you have any questions, you can ask me or Kim.
Do we need to have a motion accepting the auditor's report? Or
I don't
anything
think we
in
have
minutes?
before.
The numbers added up.
They did.
Yes.
Sorry.
No, not at all.
Numbers added up.
11 for that paper cut.
So really hoping to devote the last hour to a discussion about the legislative session and some issues that are on the horizon. So I'll start with health insurance and the Independent School Study Commission report. So now you all, I think when we met last, those reports were in the process of being finalized, so you hadn't had an opportunity to see them. Now you have them. The long and short of it is the health insurance, Vermont Educational Health Benefits Commission report was supported 6 to 3. The process that the committee undertook, I thought, was a good one in terms of really allowing for both testimony to be provided to the committee, but also wide-ranging discussion among members of the committee about the possibility of moving to a single statewide benefit. In the interest of achieving consensus, the group did not address some of the thornier issues. I did present because there was at one point a sort of wandering in the wilderness feel to it, and a lot of questions that were being raised without any framework to answer the questions. And so I presented, Emily and I worked on a possible framework for if you were going to negotiate this, here's how it would work. Any legislation would need to address issues of representation, timing, impasse resolution, ratification, incorporation into local agreements. Like, there's a discrete set of issues that are known, they're not mysterious, and here are some ways that they could be dealt with. I've used as a model the process that is employed in Ontario, because they do provincial bargaining and local bargaining. They have a two-tiered bargaining system. In addition to just talking, where it didn't make sense to overlay that process, spoke with a couple of labor attorneys and thought through how some elements might work. So that, there was a lot of enthusiasm, I think, by the majority of the members on the commission for most of what was in that framework. However, the union representatives on the commission were very clear that they couldn't support certain elements of it. So we dropped further exploration into really how that could work in terms of recommendations to the legislature, including legislative language. So that was one element of the charge, was that the commission could produce legislation. And we stopped short of that because it was clear that we'd lose the union votes. So we were really proceeding as a group in the interest of consensus. And it wasn't until 24 hours before we were supposed to vote on the report that we all received an email from one of the union representatives on the commission laying out a lot of concerns and essentially some criteria that would be necessary in order to achieve their support, and criteria that were not going to be achieved in 24 hours without. In my view, it was a sort of foreseeable outcome. I regret that I didn't see that and push a little harder to have the report address with specificity some of the thornier issues, because I think we would have had a 5 or 6-3 vote on those, and a lot more clarity to the General Assembly. But as it stands, we have a pretty high-level report of recommendations that was ultimately not supported by the 3 union reps. I sent you all a link to the Vermont Digger article that I think captures pretty clearly the union's perspective and characterization of the process. They characterized it as a political sham, essentially, that the deck was stacked. And I just have to say that was not my experience being on the commission. It really felt like a pretty thoughtful group of people who took a lot of information and testimony. And so at this point, it is going to the healthcare committee, which is unusual in terms of a bill that impacts education and collective bargaining. It really doesn't have anything to do with healthcare. So I don't know what that means. I have received some inquiries from the Joint Fiscal Office about settlement information. There's definitely a lot of interest in determining whether or not locally bargained agreements achieve the benchmarks that were set out in the legislation and or realized savings. So the Joint Fiscal Office has definitely been asked to work on this, but so far a committee has not scheduled testimony. So I expect the same political dynamic that we experienced last year to play out this year on that issue. Does anybody have any questions about that? We now have a resolution calling for negotiation of statewide benefits. So I will continue to represent the organization's support for that. However, I have tried to stay a little bit more arm's length and say, you know, this is the commission's report. Here's testimony that was submitted to the commission, and not sort of rushing in to work on the legislative language, because my belief is that the leadership needs to signal what they want to do with it before I invest too much more time and energy.
Our resolution said we wanted board members involved in the process as well.
Mm-hmm. The framework that I presented to the board had that as a key element.
Just to repeat something I said at the annual meeting in speaking against the resolution, was that every school district in my supervisory union had looked at all the resolutions and talked about them, and many of them negotiate in all sorts of different ways with the union, and no one supported the resolution that passed. So I just repeat that here as, to be fair to the people who I represent here. Who I represent. However, I also understand the resolution passed, and so that's fair enough too.
Right, that's binding now on all of us until it gets changed, but it's certainly not a universal point of view, which is another reason to, I believe, tread carefully given the politics.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, not on that, but on, you mentioned the province of Ontario, just for me, so how does it work with, they have single payer, no? Is there any, so how does it?
They have two-tiered bargaining, so they have salaries are negotiated at the provincial level. Essentially, it's a more complicated system, but there are central parties and there are local parties. The central parties get to decide what will be bargained centrally, and then the local parties bargain whatever is left. Tends to be compensation.
Yeah.
Issues are negotiated at the central level, and more of the operational issues are negotiated at the local level.
So it's operational thing, it's not healthcare?
Not healthcare, right?
Yeah, that's just
Right.
Right.
And there may be, I know, like, there's universal health care, but there's also supplemental
Yeah, 'cause they have
benefits
that
that are
Medicare and
available,
that.
so they may be, I don't know the details of, but
Okay.
I would not be surprised if they bargain supplemental coverage.
Any other questions or thoughts about that? Yeah.
Nicole, when you said that you expect the same outcome as last year, could you tell me what that means?
Sure. For those of you who were part of the fun last year,
And it was fun.
We've been on the news a bunch since then.
Yeah.
Yeah. You go to work and people go, I saw you on the news again last night.
So, last year, the issue of school employee health insurance became the key battleground issue between the governor and the Democratic House and Senate. And to the point where the governor vetoed the budget, and they had to have a special session in June. And because the VSBA, it doesn't get mentioned often, but the VSA was also involved and supportive and had a press conference with the governor. But because we played a prominent role in supporting that, it was not viewed, we got caught up in that political battle, and that was not a very useful place for us to be. I'd like to not do that again.
Yeah, as much fun as that was.
We upset some of the membership quite greatly.
And our members were, were.
By and large, they were supportive, as shown by the resolution, but there were some who were really upset that we had taken that stance. As Flora and I know, because we went to Montpelier and we're at that meeting, so.
We were yelled at very many times after.
Right. Right. So that, I mean, it was, and I believe in the end, who knows how last session would have gone. I mean, they started out wanting to take $50 million out of local budgets, and they ended up taking $8.5. Some would call that not a bad deal, but the way it ended up was not good for school boards and school districts. So I'd like to, there are issues that need to be resolved by state policymakers. We ought to inform their deliberations, but not necessarily get caught in the middle of them.
No, same.
Okay, so independent schools.
Another fun one.
So the charge to that committee was to, again, recommend legislation that would help move the independent school approval rules that the state board had been working on, and had sort of gotten locked into a political quagmire, that this study committee would somehow be able to resolve some issues and move that conversation forward. That did not happen.
Surprise.
So that report is fascinating in that it is, I think, 2 or 3 pages long. And essentially says, this is the main point on page 1. The study committee did agree unanimously that Vermont students with disabilities should be free to attend the schools that they, their parents, and their local education agency deem appropriate to them. So in many ways, this was an important and critical step forward in discussion around open enrollment and the obligations that come from acceptance of public dollars and the need to ensure that students with disabilities are not intentionally or unintentionally prevented from attending a school with their peers because of their disability. However, agreeing that students should be able to go anywhere their peers can go is one thing. How you do that is where the process really fell apart. So, so essentially, the report is a series of appendices, one of which is our testimony that we submitted with superintendents and special ed administrators, which you all told me was our position and not to negotiate away from that. And then a memo from the independent schools essentially reiterating their positions. So I'm not sure how far we've come other than the independent schools are now formally on the record saying that students with disabilities need to be able to go wherever they want. And there was a very interesting conversation around, they were still pushing for this notion of mission-based enrollment, mission-based, and the chair, to his credit, pushed back on that and said that there's no space for that in this conversation, in this context. These students need to be able to go where their peers go. So they agreed in the end to not include language that allowed them the discretion to admit or not admit.
Who was the chair?
Senator Baruth.
Oh, that's right. I saw it right there.
So he is committed to kicking off this session or picking up the ball where it was laid down by the committee and trying to shepherd it through the legislative process, which of course is far more political than a study committee process is. So again, our approach, I think, is going to stay the course on the August testimony that we provided. And I think there's going to be a definite attempt to narrow the issue down to just special education and independent schools. And our task is going to be to you know, it's not just about admissions. It's about students with disabilities. It's about open enrollment for all public tuition students. But there's also issues around discipline and fiscal oversight and et cetera that need to be attended to. So I've not been asked to testify yet about this, but I think we will just continue the same coordinated approach that we took with the superintendents and special ed administrators during the legislative session. Again, this is a very politically challenging issue.
The independent school side has crazy ability to mobilize people and descend on the legislature in mass.
They have a lot of resources also. So that's that process. Anybody have any questions or feedback on what I laid out as a sort of general approach?
Well, Nicole, I just wanted to tie it into this work we've been doing on equity, that this really ties into that. And, you know, to the extent we come out with an equity statement, that will also support the VSBA position on this.
Right. Right. So now I want to move into special education, because I think we should end with funding, because that'll then lead to our approach to advocacy. So there's two reports that have come out. The first one you received last board meeting, I believe, the district management group report on the 10 districts. Support for struggling learners, I believe is the title of the report. What you received in your packets, which is, I got it yesterday at a legislative hearing, is the UVM study. Where is that? So that is early on in your packet, after the professional development opportunities. So this is a study that was commissioned by the legislature 2 sessions ago, I believe. So it was an 18-month study of that, and I do not know all the details here, but, or I'm not conversant in all the details, where they essentially asked UVM to look at our current funding model for special education, which is a reimbursement model, which if any of you have talked to administrators know is an extremely cumbersome and time-consuming practice of completing time studies for the Agency of Education, documenting time spent on eligible activities in order to be reimbursed by them from the state of Vermont. And the special ed administrators for a number of years have been calling for a study of essentially moving to a block grant model, which provides a lot more flexibility to use resources for early interventions, multi-tiered systems of support, PBIS, the kinds of things that are shown to reduce special education needs and expenditures over time. But because those are not qualifying expenditures, there's not flexibility to use the resources that way. So this study looked at both how much we spend on special education and what a census-based model could look like. So the block grant model is also referred to as the census-based model, because it basically depends on how many kids you have in your district. So the researchers looked at what we actually spend. So our actual spending in Vermont per IEP, an excess cost of what, basically you spend per student outside of special ed. So on top of the, $17,000 or whatever it is at this point that we spend per student, it's $21,000 per IEP. Which is about 2 times greater than what is predicted using national models for special education costs, including, models of states that do it right. So we're not comparing this expenditure to, terrible models for special education. And
I'm sorry, how many more times?
2 times.
2 times.
And so their assessment is that there are 3 cost drivers. There are 3 reasons for that. One is the current system we have for funding and the administrative requirements and rules that define what are allowable costs create inefficiencies in service delivery that then contribute to overall higher spending. That the nature and extent of student need has grown more complex, and we're laying that on to top of an inefficient system. And we have weak funding for comprehensive and early support systems. So there was a pretty comprehensive presentation was provided to a joint hearing of the House and Senate yesterday afternoon. They had a lot of questions about sort of, you know, the research and what's behind the numbers. But it is clear that on the House side, they're going to look very closely at not only opportunities to be allocating special ed funding in a different way, in a way that eliminates administrative burden and redundancy and inefficiencies and incentives to do maybe
Things that don't make sense.
things that don't make sense. While at the same time, so the district management group report is in the mix, which says we have room, a fair amount of room for improvement in the state in terms of tier 1 instruction. And so if the message is we're spending an awful lot on special education, it's not clear our practices are aligned with best practice, and it's not clear our funding model supports best practice. That's a very rich complement of issues to work through. I'm concerned, this is a 142-page study from UVM, 18 months of work. The district management group report is also very comprehensive. The issues are very technical, and the clear recommendation from UVM was that you need a 5-year phase-in plan. So, you know, given the fiscal environment we're in, you always have concerns about, oh, we've now identified we're overspending.
Right.
You know, they were very clear, which I appreciated, that this has got to be phased in, that the current spending in special education reflects current practice, and just changing the way you fund things isn't going to change the practice overnight, and you could very quickly create, you know, not just chaos, but do really awful things to kids, and exacerbate the inequities. So, my approach to this conversation, which I wanted to feel out with you all, was to let the VSBA play the lead. They are the experts, that's the special ed administrators. They testified today in the House Ed and had some very good pieces. They support moving to a block grant model. We actually have a resolution supporting moving to a better, more flexible model for special education. So I'm intending to just sort of come behind them and say, you know, yes, this seems like a good approach, and there's a lot that needs to be worked through. This needs to be managed in a really thoughtful way, particularly given everything else that people are trying to contend with. So again, I think it's good that this work has been done and we have good information. To me, it belies the sort of initial sort of reaction I hear from board members sometimes is, number one, we can't talk about special education. That is not true. I mean, you have to start having conversations around these reports and the recommendations and understanding what are the practices in your system and how do they match up with what we're now learning about what is best practice. But, so there's definitely room for shifting the way we do business. It just needs to be done with a fair amount of technical assistance and time.
Kathy, then Dan.
I'm surprised that you said that, that this report compared special education delivery systems throughout the United States? Because I was under the impression that it varied greatly.
So they compared us to,
Like, I don't think we in the Northeast get away with anything at all. I think
so our comparison group, which was identified based on geographic region and states with similar demographics, and was New Hampshire, Maine, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Delaware, Kentucky, and South Dakota. So that was, and then the national average. So that was the comparison.
For spending.
No, this is for identification of special ed. We have a very, very high incidence of emotional behavior disability, very high. So that's something to explore. Further, and I don't have the, so on spending, it was national average, New Hampshire, Maine, and Massachusetts. And then there are national models that are developed that inform sort of using statistical analysis and national databases, sort of what you might expect spending to be given certain factors. So they looked at two different data sets for comparison purposes. So, you know, when you, just by way of comparison, Vermont's actual excess spending cost per IEP was $21,840. Massachusetts was $15,105. Maine was $10,000. New Hampshire's was $11,000. So there's a lot of room for further analysis and understanding. And this, again, 142-page report, which I have not read in its entirety, does a lot of that.
One concern I would have would be for small schools with block grants, just the, you know, the vagaries of the different years. So if there's ever any opportunity, I assume it would be you, Nicole, just talking about how the block grants would work. As long as school districts were allowed to keep any excess from the block grant and carry it through as a dedicated fund, rather than being obliged to turn it back to the taxpayers of the town, it would probably work out okay. But that would have to be built into the system somehow, so.
Yeah, I mean, I think now that special ed is required to be provided through the supervisory union, I think that's less of a
That's right, it
concern,
would be a larger
so it's-
population.
Yeah, but definitely questions around how that resource would be distributed equitably, and that would be accountability for it, so that, you know, some of the questions that came up yesterday was, you know, how do we know if these funds will then actually be used for students with special needs? Well, one way you know is because the IEP is still the IEP, and the district's obligated to provide the services. The question is, you know, the concern I would have is that the amount needs to be set at the right amount, so that students are actually getting high-quality services.
Any other questions or comments about that? Kim?
I know that this probably isn't going to be an immediate situation, but I think if you are part of a DMG study, you're having these conversations at the board table. If you weren't, and this is a sort of shift instead funding, boards not immediately dealing with it by their own study may not be fully engaged with the conversation, and budget season lends itself to that. I'm wondering if there are suggested questions around this particular topic in the legislature that we would invite boards to consider at their own board tables. So almost like a little mini toolkit around special ed funding and understanding better our own implications in our own districts.
So I'm not gonna be able to pull something like that together for this budget.
Yeah.
But I do, you know, one of the questions I think we'll get to maybe under new business, but I know you all wanted to hear from folks at the agency around the special ed stuff. and what the agency is doing to respond to some of these recommendations. The fact that our next meeting is scheduled to be on Valentine's Day complicated matters for me in terms of not feeling too cool about inviting people to come to that meeting on that date. But, so we'll talk about what your pleasure is for February. But I think it is, again, to illustrate the sort of, needs to be thoughtful. I'm not interested in sort of rushing out the gate and giving more questions in January. But I do think, in anticipation of next year, once, VCSEA and others have had time to sort of sit with some of this stuff, and we'll see what emerges this legislative session, we'll be able to provide boards with understanding your role in the special education conversation.
Right, and I think even if it's not specific to budgets.
Right.
I think it could be that it's in March, past the budget conversations, but as boards are planning their year in their summer retreats, or they are past budget and now having conversations that are more forward-looking, or just, I think sometimes that's what happens. We don't know what we don't know as board members, and if we're actively engaged in a particular topic at the time, it strikes us and it is on our agenda.
Right.
And maybe more broadly it's not, and so we could help to raise the collective IQ around some of these topics by offering suggested agenda discussions or something.
Let me just throw out, Kim, that we just got our DMG report today. The superintendent is not here because he's meeting with the team today, the report for the supervisory union. And I'm just looking through it a little bit, and it basically goes right at these issues. So maybe others here are doing the DMG thing, but we were one of the first ones.
What is
We
it?
were too, yeah.
It's the district management group, and I think there were 5 samples around the state, supervisory unions who chose to be. 11, okay, who chose to be the initial ones. So it's a foray into the entire educational system within the supervisory union, and a comprehensive report comes out.
And there are a couple of different versions of that, like we had done the special ed specific version before. We're now part of the second cohort in the broader study through
Which
the
is
GMG.
different. So
They're
it's the
two
same
different
provider.
same
technical
provider,
assistance
two
provider,
different lenses
Yes.
through which they were doing their analysis. So probably in either one of those, you would have gotten feedback on the topic of special ed, but if that's still only however many groups went through that process. And
Right. So I think, the key takeaways for the agency are what we all really need to better understand, is sort of how are they orienting their staff around special ed to respond to the technical assistance needs out in the field that have been revealed through this study. So does anybody have any, people are good with the approach of VCSEA playing the lead and raising questions about how a block grant approach would work and making sure issues related to equity are attended to.
Neil?
Am I right to assume that the VCSE does this come as a surprise to them, or?
No.
Okay.
No, I mean, they were eager to read the final report, but they recognize that the current model creates inefficiencies. And this study, I mean, they also did a lot of interviews, which I think is great, and they have sort of reflections back from the field, which are all consistent. I mean, basically, Tammy Colby, Professor Colby from UVM, was pretty clear, we now have this growing body of evidence in Vermont that we need to re-examine our special education practices, because they're both very costly, and it's not clear that they're hitting the mark. So, what to do with that is the next step in the journey.
Mary Kate?
Yeah, I would just add ensuring appropriate transition time to that list.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So is that general nod of heads that we're on the right path there?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so then the last piece is funding. So many of you went to the Governor's Summit. I haven't seen anything formal come out of that. I did get a sort of draft summary of the themes. And I'll read the 5 strategies and tools that were summarized there. No new initiatives or policy changes. First one. Increasing, look into increasing flexibility in all funding streams. Examine existing regulations in a variety of areas, including licensing, to determine if some things can be removed as obstacles for innovation. Support changes in contracts that limit the ability of school systems to be responsive. And ensure that the district management group report is acted upon and used to leverage better services for students in a more cost-effective way. So not a lot that has to do with how to address the FY19 budget situation. These are all sort of more longer term things to look into that could be leading to the types of inefficiencies that were illuminated through the special ed funding study. But the fact remains, there is an FY19 hole that needs to be filled. Whether or not you want to call it a hole or not, it's a gap that is likely to not disappear on its own. So we don't have a resolution that offers a solution to this problem. We have resolutions that provide for the kinds of longer term planning and thinking that would again continue to attempt to bend the cost curve. When the speaker was here last month, she alluded to examination of the funding formula as a solution. I believe a new proposal from Representative Beck was presented today. I'm not familiar with it at this point, but I expect there will be others that I believe the chair of the Ways and Means Committee, which is the committee that will take the conversation, will start the conversation, indicated there were 4 different possibilities. In one which would include moving to an total income-based system. That doesn't solve the problem, that changes what the problem looks like, right? Mm-hmm. So you may not get a property tax bill that goes up 8 cents or 9 cents this year because you don't get those kind of bills anymore. It comes in
It comes in a different envelope.
So right. So
Different pocket.
I think we have a resolution supporting looking increasing the revenue streams that are relied upon to fund education. So my approach has been to we think the current system, as complex as it is equitable. And it could be made more equitable. We'd be supportive of that. We're not supportive of a shift that would erode equity. But it's hard to know how that exercise really addresses the question of and a tremendous amount of one-time money was used last year to fund ongoing activities that's not there anymore. So my sense from conversations with folks in the governor's office is that they're open to discussions, but they're not gonna be open to something that raises taxes, even if it does it in a different way. You know? So, I don't, but again, I guess my takeaway is this. Had a meeting with folks in the administration earlier this week. They asked for my ideas. I said, I don't have any ideas. A crisis has been created.
We warned you about it.
We warned you.
What ideas last
Your
year?
conversation needs to be not with me, but with the Speaker of the House and the President of the Senate. You all need to figure this out. The School Boards Association is not going to be caught in the middle of two very different approaches to solving a problem that you mutually created. We have come to the table with suggestions for long-term cost containment that we believe is responsible, makes sense, could work. But we're not going to be in the business of fixing this FY19 problem for you.
I think,
So I just need a little feedback on this.
well, I think we should state that it's always been our line all along too, that boards are culpable in this too. We've got some responsibility in this. It's not just they did it.
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word culpable,
We
but
spent the money, yeah.
our partners in the,
In the crime, whatever you want to
it's
use.
not a crime
Well,
to educate children.
Yeah. Okay, I stand corrected. Dan?
Well, there is one thing, and I mentioned this earlier when Donna was here, and it may not go anywhere, but the Senate Bill 181, I think it's called, which I believe would seriously water down the income sensitivity portion of the way we currently pay taxes. I guess I think it wouldn't be inappropriate for the VSBA to let, if we can get a consensus on it, we don't believe that should be further watered down. I would like to state that myself anyway. Again, I have no idea if this will go anywhere, but if it does, that's not a political football. It's just, we already have a funding mechanism. Don't take away income sensitivity from that.
So, one option that we have, I'm hesitant to ask you to take any position right now because we haven't seen.
Yeah, we don't have no idea, yeah.
But I would expect that by your February meeting, there will be clear options that are under consideration, and whether or not you would, take a position on any number of them, or based on what we're seeing as emerging, adopt some principles
That sounds good.
that would sort of respond to what we're seeing. That's definitely, I think, an option. If, the governor is going to put something on the table, presumably at his budget address in 2 weeks, and so that things will get kicked up even more at that point. So I really do feel like by February, we should have a little bit better sense. I'm frankly shocked that we're here in January 10th and nobody seems to have any clue what to do. I'm very surprised. And that we would be sort of, the entity to supply the resolution just seems totally inappropriate.
But look at the state though. I think given last year's debacle, they certainly haven't done anything to impress me that they've learned anything from that mess.
Yeah, is there
I'm-
legislation?
Yeah, I'm not
correct that?
surprised that they,
To prevent that from happening again.
yeah.
Right.
So, but I absolutely agree with you that it's not our problem and we should not be their whipping boy, which is what they're looking for. You know, they're looking for
I
somebody
think
to
they wanna
place the
fix the
blame.
problem, I mean, they want a way out, and everybody, nobody want, but.
They want somebody to blame when
Well, it's all of our problems, but
There's
I
just-
I appreciate what you're saying.
They want to have somebody to blame when it doesn't work.
So they,
Mary Kate, and then Lucas?
Sorry.
So, the thing that made it worse last year was that it all happened after people had already worked out their budget. So I think to the extent that we can advocate for, you gotta figure it out, and you can't tell us, after the fact that we gotta cut, our budgets. So that timing piece, I'd love to see us try to advocate for that piece, so we're not in that position. So when we're creating our budgets, we know what we gotta do.
But that's too late even for that.
Yeah,
Our budget,
it's getting too late.
we're gone.
I will
I know
say,
the timing thing
from
is
the,
hard.
from the administration's, what appeared to me their point of view, was they've sent their signals starting in October with Rebecca's, Secretary Holcomb's ratio memo. Like, that's where they're going. That's where they're going.
so I had a community forum with two of my local representatives just this last weekend, and I held my tongue when they claim to only be an administrative function when it comes to the school, the setting the tax rate. Yet, I remember them cutting themselves in the back when they reduced it or kept it level. And we had a big long conversation, and we really illustrated to them what kind of turmoil this is causing. When we were explaining budgets that would have a tax increase of 5%, which meant actually riffing like 7 or 8% of the staff. And it was like, oh, so we're actually reducing our budget by 5%. We're going to have a 5% tax increase, and that's going to be really detrimental. And so they heard that message, and the point that you had about not letting this happen again is where I think now getting legislators to actually take away some of their power to keep taxes lower is not something that's likely going to happen. But I had a pretty good week, and it was a Saturday morning, illustrating why it needs to happen. Because the big problem there is this administrative function that got turned into a political football. And this isn't the first time this has happened. It happened a decade ago, and they did change legislation to prevent it from happening the way it was happening. Now it's kind of evolved again to become that political football again. They figured out again how to make it bad. But that's where I think it would be important to emphasize, this problem, schools are spending money, but this problem this year is more caused by poor foresight by the legislature.
And the governor, I mean, that was a joint deal that they
If you look at the governor's staff of a decade ago, and this governor's staff, a lot of the same people who pulled the same stunt before. I was there back then.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other thoughts, comments? Is Nicole on the right? Again, is she on the right pathway with this? Does anybody have any concerns about that?
Not our fight.
I do have a question about the process. Somebody explained it to me, and my fevered brain isn't working tonight, but there's a reason why we have to build our budgets so that they can get voted on in March or April. But the legislature isn't doing their budget and setting some things until after we.
Right.
And it all gets very confusing because that's why he thinks he can come back and say, well, just cut your budget. So is
Well,
there
those are
some
two
way
different
that schedule can get
Not if you
coordinated?
still want local control of the budgets. So the easiest way to have it done is to say, this is how much money you get. You know what it is, you know what the tax rate's gonna be, you can plan around it.
It's not equitable.
That's not equitable.
But Nicole, Diane,
The reason that we have the process and the timing that we have is because we have an education fund that has to pay for Or we go to we eliminate the statewide funding system and go back to a process that's been ruled unconstitutional. So those are
I don't think that's gonna
where
work.
we are is a statewide funding system that has to pay for the sum total of budgets that are developed and approved at the local level. And so
Just ask him to
they
mute his phone.
can't,
You should be able to mute his phone for that.
Hey Clarence,
Yes.
could you put on the mute button on your phone? Because we can pick up a lot of what's being said there.
Oh,
And then if you want to speak, just hit your mute button and you should be able to get right back to us. Is that possible?
maybe he was.
I think you did.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just try again. So, the December 1 letter is required by law, and it's their best attempt to predict what now, it used to be tax rates, but now it's what the yield will be based on number of pupils, grant growth in the grand list, and projected education spending. But, so 2 of those factors can be known to them. One of them cannot be known until budgets are approved. And the agency, goes to, I don't think they do a scientific study, but I go to monthly meetings of VSBA, the school business officers, and in December and January, Brad James comes and says, where are you all at? To try to get a sense of what's happening. That's not the only source of information they use, but it's not as though it's happening in a dark room in the agency without any connection or discussion with the field. So there is an attempt to make that December 1 letter as close to, but it very quickly becomes a political football, and a marker for boards to use as they're building their budgets and explaining to their communities what the likely impacts are. I think what I've observed, and one reason why I think the video is a very important resource, is because the formula is complicated and because the timing doesn't make sense to a lot of people, it's all too easy to do this. And, boards will say at budget information meetings, we don't know what the tax rate's gonna be, because that's Montpelier does that, and we won't know, it's sort of, which has elements of truth, and, the tax rate from Montpelier is a reflection of the collective decisions that are made by every community around the state. So every community has to own what they do, not only for what it means for their school district, but for what it does to the fund. And I don't see that. Because it's extremely abstract. But I've seen, even now, there are districts that saw a pretty sizable bump in their equalized pupils this year, unexpectedly.
They're making hay with the.
And they're the big districts, and so
And what percentages were those, Nicole? Because ours went up a little over 2%, but are you
I don't
seeing
know about
bigger
the
jumps
percent.
in the
I-
equalized pupil per pupil?
Yeah, I don't know what the percent increase was, I know the raw number.
Yeah.
In certain, like 50 equalized pupils, which is
In
pretty
some.
significant. And so in that situation, you have, if your market is spending per equalized pupil, you can see a 6% budget increase, but your spending per equalized pupil only goes up 1.8%. So
But the
as
total
far as
budget-
the governor's target goes, you're golden.
Yeah.
But as far as the ed fund goes,
Exactly.
you've just put a lot more pressure on the ed fund. That's not 3.2% growth rate, that's 6%. And the larger districts
The-
are putting the biggest pressure on the ed fund. Because even if you're a tiny district and you're spending $18,000 per student, and your tax rate, your spending per equalized pupil goes up 4%, that's a drop in the bucket in the ed fund. Versus a larger, so here's my
Not an
point,
equal
it's
opportunity
complicated. And it reflects the sum total of every community's deliberation around the board table, conversation with the community, and it all adds up to bills that need to be paid.
To that point, so I think, like as a board member, I think that's like the key thing, right? And we've got the education funding video, which I think is super helpful, but as boards progress through this budgeting process and then have to deal with the changing legislative landscape and terms being used and recommendations being thrown out, like, I almost wonder if we need like an FAQ page on the VSBA website to explain some of these things as they come up, because I think they're likely to come up, and if we're all talking about them or don't even really understand them at the time, we could all be saying different things about stuff, which is gonna make the situation even worse, right? If there's some single resource that we as board members can go to say, okay, this was said the other day, here's what this really means, right? I mean, I don't know if we're gonna be able to stay on top of it, but
It's very dynamic.
like, so, I mean, I don't think, like, the timing of it sucks, like, you know, Mary
What do you
Kay said.
mean why this was said the other day?
Oh, that was like an example, so if something was said in the legislature.
Yeah.
Like, or somebody brought forward a proposal and they used terminology, or they made an assertion that it is this way because of X, almost like a fact check or something like that on the VSBA website, so that our membership understands, politics aside, right, here's what was said and here's what this means in lay terms, because that's one of the things I'm gonna need to be able to explain to my community.
Right.
And every year, my presentation at town meeting is 10%, here's what our school is doing, and 90%, here's how you figure out the tax rate, here's the calculation that's used, and I explain it every year, line by line by line, and people are always like, oh, wow, thank you, that was very helpful. But that's what I spend all my time on, it's not like, you know, what great things are
What's
going on in my
happening for
school.
So I don't know that I'm gonna be able to commit to that type of a process, but I have, in the last 2 years, since I became executive director, the last 2 town meeting days, done a town meeting day bulletin that tries to provide board members with some talking, like, here's what people are saying, or here's what you might be hearing, here are some of the reasons for it, and here's how it links to whatever's happening in your budget. My goal this year is to work with Susan so that by the middle of February, before our town meeting day webinar, we have, she alluded to some potential PowerPoint slides that could be used and talking points. I feel like it's a little premature to get that. I'm trying to get a better sense of what's actually going to happen before I invest a lot of time in, it might be this, it might be that, it might be, because people have only so much bandwidth. And I think ultimately what's gonna be really useful is like, tell me what I need to know. So that when I'm going, you know, as I'm thinking about going into town meeting and I'm having my budget information sessions, I have at least a somewhat firm grip on what seems to be transpiring vis-a-vis the messages that are out there. So I'm committed to doing that earlier than I have in previous years, and to try to link it to some additional resources that'll be available when that webinar happens.
I think having it earlier is important, because in our town, the town and village, they have their meeting like 10 days before town meeting.
Yep.
We'll take one more and then we'll move on here.
I was just thinking about that proposal floated last year, and that wasn't an election year, and nothing ended up happening. So despite the fact there are 4 options out there right now, and the energy we've taken and the time to talk about all this, do we think that something would happen in an election year that changes the funding formula dramatically, just pragmatically?
I don't know. I really don't know. One thing I'm concerned about is they've set a precedent for themselves with that healthcare recapture. So an easy thing to do would be to say, we're gonna set some ratio targets for you, or some spending targets for you. And we're gonna assume you can meet them. And we're gonna calculate an amount for every district, and I'm concerned that a precedent has been set, which we would push against vociferously. However, because why have a democratic process where budgets are voted on by the electorate if you're gonna turn around and say, you don't actually get to spend that amount of money? Take over the process if that's what you're gonna do.
It's not that much fun.
Anyway, it's very hard to know.
Yeah.
But the governor was very clear in his State of the State address that he's not gonna support tax increases. So.
All right. So, move on here. We've got the consent agenda to be approved. We'll take a motion on it.
Well, go ahead.
I was gonna move to approve the December minutes as
Yes.
presented.
Celeste moving them. Do we have a second?
Also,
John with a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? New business. So, possible date change, is that just because of Valentine's Day?
I
mean,
don't,
am
it's a big meeting. I don't wanna lose people because that happens to be a date that some people pay attention to. I'm not paying attention to it, but I wanna.
Be sensitive here.
I want to make sure that it's recognized, that
We're taking away
And any
Gino's
speakers that would
excuse for not
Right.
recognizing.
The
Can we bring our
agenda.
sweeties?
Absolutely.
no sweeties allowed.
Yeah, they can sit in these chairs right
So I don't know
here.
if this is a sign that your relationship's in a good place, that you don't have to celebrate Valentine's Day, or a bad place? Who finds that date to be difficult?
Who's likely to not attend
Be
on the
just-
14th?
Yeah.
Only because I have a doctor's.
Okay,
It's
so-
fine to have
Yeah.
romantic commitments.
Come on,
You
it's-
have to go to extreme measures.
Okay, Nicole, earlier you mentioned about special ed. Would it be wise to move special ed to March? I mean, I thought you alluded to that when you talked about the special ed people coming that we'd asked for.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't feel great about, I mean, I don't want to impose on people. Maybe it's not an issue for anybody.
It is
That's
also Ash
great.
Wednesday,
It's also Ash
It's
Wednesday.
Ash Wednesday.
which could be a big
Yeah,
deal.
I
Did you
think
have
we
a
ought to
proposed different date to have it?
Either Tuesday or Thursday.
Or the following Wednesday.
Okay, thanks, Clarence. Clarence thinks that we ought to move it to Tuesday or Thursday.
So Tuesday.
Well, I won't make it probably, because I'll be flying into the country from Malawi, so,
Were you
Ooh.
going to make it on the 14th?
yes.
Okay.
I specifically told him to fly me in on the 13th.
You'll
Because
be
I
here
could
for
make
the
it on the
14th.
14th, but that's okay. If the consensus is to do it on the 13th.
Can I ask
then
about
I'll
the
have to be
following Wednesday,
I
since
will make
Wednesday's
it
the
on
day
the
that people,
here. So Mary Kate also can't make it on the 13th.
So who went?
Just move it up a week. Stay on
we have
Wednesday,
budget
go.
meetings and board meetings that whole month on
Move it back a
Tuesdays.
week?
Oh, go to the 21st.
The 21st.
Yeah,
That's
back-
our
back.
webinar, for
Oh.
town meeting webinar.
The 15th?
All right, so this is very, I always say
Yeah.
it when we do this, let's not do this.
We could do a
Let's do a
meeting
doodle
wizard.
poll
Yeah.
or something like that and figure out if there's a better date, and the 14th will be one of the options in there, and if that's the best date, we'll keep with the 14th. Is that, but we'll see if people can switch. So try to
Carrie
stay,
will send something out to the board, she and I will work out some options.
does that work for everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other, anything, this is generally where if you had an agenda item that you would like to see on a further agenda that you could suggest it here. Does anybody have any suggestions? Clarence?
Gio, I'd just like to make a couple comments.
Here, let me turn this up just a second. Okay, go ahead, Clarence.
I had to go in for surgery that I wasn't planning on just before Christmas, and I'm going to be walking on one foot for 6 weeks and on IV antibiotics, so my participation is going to be limited. To that end, I don't believe I'm going to be able, I know I won't be able to attend the national meeting with you that I had hoped to. I would like to think I haven't talked to Nicole too much about it, but if the board was so inclined they wanted to send someone else to replace me, I'm all for that, whether it's a treasurer or another member of the executive committee. That would be up to the board. It's not my place to say. But I hopefully by town meeting or sometime at the end of April, I'll be back in the swing of things. But right now, I'm still in rehab, and I haven't even been able to get home yet. So
Wow. So, Clarence, thank you. We hope you heal up quickly there. And yeah, with the rest of the board's permission, I just made an assumption that we would go. Normally, we send 2 people as delegates. They're both voting delegates to the national assembly, and then they attend the conference while they're there. And so, Kim, being the secretary, treasurer.
Can I be the secretary?
Treasurer, I asked her what her availability was, and she's checking into it. And if she's not able to, then we'll probably go to Celeste next, because she's the senior most person on the thing. What was
I
that?
just wanted it to come up before the board, so, all right? I miss being there with you
Yes,
folks.
well,
Thank
you
you,
are
Ben.
Miss
Get
Clarence.
well.
Heal up.
Yep.
And we won't, and Amy will keep your seat warm until you come back.
You're messing up our assigned seating.
Any other business?
Maybe we can convince Celeste that they could run again if we send her to the pump.
All those in favor of adjourning, please stand up.